Today's topic is on female genital mutilation, child labor, young brides, and human trafficking. The content of this video may be triggering for some viewers.
We are going to talk about a very important topic this evening. We're going to talk about female genital mutilation, a very needed topic to talk about. And we have a special guest on the couch this evening with us, none other but Sha Givens, who has been working in this area, established her company in 2008. She is the founder of I Can Fly International, helping women and girls who are affected by human trafficking, female genital mutilation, child labor, and she is here to help us understand this phenomenon. So, welcome, Ms. Givens, to the couch with us. We are so excited to have you, Shay. So, explain to us, how does a Los Angelino end up across the Atlantic on the East African coast of Kenya? How does that happen?
You know what I tell people all the time? It's so interesting how life could throw you a loop. You know, how do you go from California to Kenya and you're supposed to be normal? And so interestingly enough, I started taking mission trips to Kenya some years ago, and it just totally like fascinated me and changed my life. And I ended up starting a school for children who were affected by child labor. And so when that started, I was like, oh, let's do some good for the world. Let's help kids who are affected by child labor who can't afford to go to school. And then this was in 2008. And then in 2012, everything took a huge turn when I read a story in Kenya about a 10-year-old who gets married off to a 55-year-old man. And I'm reading this story and I find out that the little girl is sold for a dowry price of $40 cash and a cow. And interestingly enough, as traumatic as that was, the girl had to go through female genital mutilation before the marriage because she was not considered a woman unless parts of her vagina were removed. It's like a rites of passage in certain tribes and certain cultures around the world. And so as I'm reading this, you know, I'm traumatized by the fact that she's 10. I'm traumatized by the fact that she has to go through mutilation and she's sold. And so as I'm reading the story further, I find out that they're rescuers. They're these amazing women that step in when they hear about these atrocities and they kidnap the girls back from the older men. So I said, wow, yay, story's over. People are helping. But actually, when people help, sometimes things get worse because the families will decide, well, since the 10-year-old was kidnapped in this particular story, the parents gave the man the 6-year-old younger sister.
Okay, hold up. Wait a minute. Wait.
Oh, no.
I'm about to come, man. This might be a little triggering for me. So if I just want to be, I'm really, I apologize.
It's okay.
So
It's okay.
trigger warning, I may go off screen.
It's okay.
Okay. Okay. No, I apologize. I didn't mean to cut you off, Ms. Givens.
No, I mean, I had the same reaction. And so I'm thinking 6, I'm thinking 55, I'm thinking child possibly having sex, going through mutilation, all in one shot. It's not okay.
And what year is this again? Because, you know, people oftentimes think that this is, you know, things of the past, but you're talking about 2012, this particular story, right? Did I hear correctly?
Correct. I read this story in 2010. Mm-hmm. It was about 2 years after I started a high school in Kenya. And so, you know, I'm interested in cultural affairs. I'm interested in international women, girls issues. And I run across this article. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I was working with one particular tribe where they didn't practice these types of things. But of course, there are different tribes and culture throughout the continent of Africa. And this particular tribe practices marrying off their little girls and mutilating them.
Okay.
And so I actually heard this voice. It was like the voice of God says, go get them. 3 words, go get them. And I'm thinking, go get them. I don't know this tribe. I don't speak this particular dialect language. How? And to make a long story short, I ended up finding a nurse. There was a nurse in Kenya who was a rescuer, and she and I joined forces. This was in 2011, 2012. And we started somewhat of an underground railroad system where she would snatch the girls on motorcycles and buses and take them to undisclosed locations and hide them from these men. And I started building houses in Kenya called butterfly houses on our campus. And the girls would come, and we hired security guards, and we put them in school, and we got them help. And since 2012, we have had dozens of child brides and mutilation survivors and girls who have been trafficked and defiled come through our program. And so we started from there, and it's continuing to grow. And we like spreading our message that these atrocities are happening to young girls. And as a result of it, they are continuing to rise because they are now using their voices to speak up in areas, in communities where girls are told that they have no voice.
Wow. That is absolutely incredible. And
Amazing.
I know it is not an easy work that you're doing. Help us to understand, because you're still doing this in a very patriarchy society, right? And so how do you as women um in that particular setting pull together and be able to pull this off and be safe for yourself as well?
It takes a community. So it's like a community effort. You find people who believe that it's wrong, and you take those people and you ask them, what are they willing to sacrifice? Can they give up their time? Can they hide a child in their home? Can they cook a meal along the way? You find a group of people who can help you pull off the rescues, and you make it happen. When we first started in 2012, I thought I was Superwoman. And I would go into some of these communities and ask them to stop, and my life was in danger at one point. And so I figured out that I had to do this differently. And so now we send in the police first. Now we have the support of the local police in certain areas.
Wow.
Where before they practiced early marriage. So they were against what we were doing. Now we find that there are chiefs who in the villages who back us and who want to help us. And so some of them will call us and tell us about a mutilation ceremony or a marriage ceremony. And we'll go with the police and we'll rescue the girls. There's some communities that we've tried to go into, and we were told if we passed a certain border that any of us could be killed. And so we simply stand on the other side of the border and we send in spies to find girls who want to run. And for those who want to run, we take them and we hide them. And so each scenario, each case is different in how we handle it. But as a team, we figure it out.
Wow. Wow. That is incredible. Olivia, you care for women. You're a women's health practitioner. What do you think about hearing about this?
I'm actually have a lot of experience in taking care of women who come to this country who have had female genital mutilation when they were young. And going through and working with them on how to do a pap smear, how to do regular women's health, how to give birth, and helping them through that trauma. And it is incredibly impactful. And just hearing you, this is so amazing. I mean, one of the first ladies I ever took care of when I first became a nurse midwife had, I think it's called like stage 4. I mean, she had nothing but the scar tissue and the orifice. And somehow we had to figure out how to screen her for cervical cancer. And it was absolutely, I mean, I had to sit there with her, walk her through everything. And she was so willing, but she had so much trauma that at any point when I even just like touched her or sat at her level, she would start to sob and talk about the trauma of the experience, and helping her give birth later on. I mean, it's just incredibly wow. But I have a question for you, Miss Shay. I remember I've been learning about this since I was a kid, because I believe like in the 80s or 90s, there was a princess who came from an African nation who came here, I think asking for asylum for her daughters so that they would not then have it done to them. And I remember it was this big thing. I mean, I was young, so I don't remember her name or what country she came from. I don't think she won. Like, she was asking if she could stay here and keep her daughters here for that. And she ended up getting sent back, I think. But a few years ago on Netflix, there was this documentary about male circumcision, the penis circumcision. And they had an African woman on there talking about how she used to be so against female genital mutilation. And then when she went back home to her country, she realized that we're all crazy and that America doesn't understand. And that's like colonialism trying to go and change their ideals. And that she actually opted to have it done as an adult. And that she was so happy she was, because now she wasn't as sensitive as she was before and she could enjoy intercourse better. And I remember thinking, wow, this seems so slanted. But I wanted to ask you, have you come across that where you have barriers of women who are like, this is amazing? And how do you integrate these young girls back into society if their value and their worth is based on this happening to them? That's loaded, I know. But I have so many questions.
No, I think yeah, we all do. So go right ahead with your questions.
Yeah, that was it. Like, how do you help them integrate?
Okay.
Yeah.
How do I help them integrate back into society after they've had female genital mutilation?
No, so like if they escape or you help them escape and they didn't have it done and they're young or they're older, if their value and their worth is in that, how do they go back to their people? Do they have to integrate into a completely different society? How do they then move on in life and have success?
Well, we have a great one of our survivors is actually I don't want to call her our poster child, but she's basically one of our heroes, because what happened with her, she went through female genital mutilation at the age of 12. And in her community, she's from the Maasai community. If you've ever heard of the Maasai people, it is like known that this is what you do, this is what makes you a woman, this is what makes you a great Maasai warrior, etc. And so what she did, she went back to her community after it was done, and she talked about with her community and her family why it's wrong and how it has affected her. What happened with this girl in particular, she was cut in one of her veins and bled out and almost died.
Wow.
And so when she came to our school, we realized that she was also infected at some point. And so when she went back to her family and told him the story about her being infected and almost died, they realized, wait a minute, there's a disconnect here. And she says she wants to be an advocate against it because of her almost close to death experience. And everyone now wants to hear her story, because the families don't really think it's wrong, because they don't often see the risks that are involved. But because she expresses what happened to her and the risks that are involved with pregnancy and infection, it kind of changes people's point of view. I don't know if I answered that question, but that's one story where we've seen how it actually becomes a benefit.
So you think it's you think it's a lack of education then? It's a lack of people actually knowing what they're actually doing?
Yes.
Wow. Wow.
That's interesting.
Because for some people, culture outweighs the risk because they don't know.
And
So
also, would you also speak
right?
to?
you guys can go ahead.
I'm just going to ask my question because for those of us, when I hear, can you first go back a little bit? What exactly is genital mutilation? Because when you think of it, I heard Olivia say, okay, she got pregnant. So for someone like I'm completely triggered, but still I want to ask a question in regards, like, just back it up and just say exactly what is female mutilation, because apparently you can still have a child. What exactly does it mean and things like that? So, and then how do you have a kid? Not in the sense like I don't know how they're made, but in the sense of how do you know, Tasca, Dr. Moore, you did, you did surgery down there. So my mind is like blown. So
yeah, and I'm gonna have Shay start, and then I can touch on the complications that we encounter in delivery. I trained on the East Coast of America in New York, and so we had a very high population of African women who also underwent female genital mutilation. So it does impact labor and delivery, the labor and the delivery process, specifically the delivery process, can lead to significant lacerations, very, very painful, can be very hard to do depending on the grade, very hard to do a simple pap smear, a simple pelvic exam. And that's outside of the psychological trauma that comes with it. So yeah, Shay, I'm gonna have you describe it for our guests.
Okay, so here's what happens. Um, and I won't speak medically. I'll speak from the experiences that the girls go through. What they do is there's normally a mother or a midwife type lady in the village who comes in the middle of the night. Some of them bring a razor blade, some of them bring a sharp knife, some of them bring very old tools. The family holds the girl down by her legs and her arms, and she severs off the outer parts of the vagina.
So the vulva.
The vulva, correct. And then sometimes the girl, depending on how far they cut, she has to be sewn. She has to be sewn back up. And then sometimes the girls are left bleeding. It just all depends. And
yeah,
so
vascular area. And
what about the labia? What about the labia?
So the labia is part of the vulva, and
Okay.
sometimes it includes the removal of the clitoris. That's really part of the goal of it. And what a lot of people don't realize is that the vulva is very vascular. And so vulva surgery can lead to significant bleeding, even just from birth trauma. You can have these huge hematomas that happens as a result of that. And people have a lot of varicosities on the vulva. So it can be extremely traumatic, can lead to significant bleeding because of it. But yeah, it's quite a traumatic experience for women. The question I had for you also, you spoke to the young girls now using their voice. And I'm just really excited to hear that. How are they using their voice, and how are you changing the minds of a culture that's so deeply rooted? I mean, you talk about the Maasais. The Maasais are one of the last nomadic tribes in Africa, you know, and so they're still holding on to their nomadic culture, and they've really been challenged with trying to balance between the modern world and their culture. And so how are you able to approach a group like that?
well, what we do is we start with the girls because we have mentor programs. We have different programs that empower the girls to use their voice. So like, for instance, there's a community in Kenya. I won't necessarily say the name of the tribe, but they're the ones who we cannot cross their borders because of the risk of being beaten or murdered. And so they refuse to let go of that particular culture. And so what we do each year, we have a rescue camp every November and December, which is female genital mutilation cutting season in this particular community. These girls literally run to the camp. We put them in groups and we tell them who wants to stay and who wants to go, who wants to take a risk and run from this particular practice. We take those girls and we mentor them. And we tell them, you're not going to see your families for the next 4 to 5 years. And within those 4 to 5 years, we're going to empower you to understand who you are, why your voice is important, and how you can go back to your community and save other girls. Is that something you want to do? 95% of these girls say yes.
Wow.
And so because this program is pretty much new, we have dozens of girls who are learning the power that they have by being able to speak up and say no and go back and get the others. And so this is how we're starting. These girls are 13, 14, 15 years old, and they feel like this has to stop, and it begins with us. And they're bold, they're courageous, and they're ready. And so at I Can Fly International, we're just giving them the tools to go back, because we know, like for me, I'm a foreigner, I'm from California. Are they going to necessarily listen to me? Probably not. But their own, when they hear these girls and hear their testimonies of running away, and mommy, why did you do this to me? And this is what happens when you do this to the girls in our community. They're going to listen some more, and they're going to be more aware of how it hurts the girls. And so this is how we're helping girls become empowered.
What happened to those laws that were, sorry.
No, go ahead.
What happened to those laws that were passed in some of the African countries that outlawed genital, mutilation? I thought Kenya was one of those countries.
Kenya is one of those countries. It's so funny because the year that I launched the Butterfly Project program for mutilation survivors, they announced on the radio, the United Nations, and there was some other global groups helped Kenya put it into law that mutilation was against the law. So the day I heard the news, I was in a car, and when they announced it over the radio, I started clapping. I was so excited. And then someone says, "Oh no, what are you clapping for? Your job just got harder." And I said, wait, what do you mean my job got harder? What do you mean the United Nations in Kenya, they outlawed mutilation? They said, no. Do you think people care what the United Nations says? Do you think people care about the laws? They have their own cultural laws and their cultural identity. All they're going to do is take this underground, and you're going to have midwives and mothers and aunties in the community that are just going to do it underground, and it's going to be 10 times worse.
Wow.
And I said, oh boy, I didn't think about that. Did it get worse? Yes. During coronavirus, it got 10 times worse in 2020.
Wow.
Because when the government decided to lock down the communities and the villages because of the virus, people couldn't go to work, people couldn't buy food. So what did they do? They sold their children. Before they sold their children, the girls had to go through mutilation. The cops were busy making sure people had on a mask, and they weren't looking out for girls who were being trafficked across the border. And so we realized that this thing is way bigger than us, and the laws are the laws, but people have their own cultural laws. And this is a survival method as well.
Yeah. Wow. Shay, you're amazing. I'm like, you're not many people take my breath away. You're taking my breath away literally. What motivates you because as you mentioned, you kind of mentioned it back there. I'm going to pull it back again. You are an African American woman, and there's certainly perspectives about America and America's interference with other cultures. How do you stay motivated?
Well, I'll tell you this. I'm working on my book right now. Remember I told you the story about the 10-year-old and the 6-year-old that were married off to the 55-year-old man?
Mm-hmm.
Where those two little girls were eventually rescued. I had the opportunity to meet them in person. They were hiding at an undisclosed location in the middle of a desert in northern Kenya. I went and I met them, and I asked these little girls one question. I said, what do you want? Do you want me to buy you a bicycle? Do you want me to send you to college? Do you want me to buy you a house? Whatever you want, I'll do it. Do you know these little girls said one thing? They said, tell our stories. That was it. This was in 2012. And so that day, I promised those little girls that I would spend the rest of my life telling the story. And that I would help other little girls like them. I made that promise. And as I've continued to meet survivors and hear their stories and how they're crying out, they motivate me to do what I do, because I understand that right now, very few people listen to them. And if I could put my voice with theirs, if I could add to their volume, then maybe we can put a dent in this practice that is physically and mentally hurting them.
Wow.
Ms. Givens, I have a question for you. The work that you do is tremendous, but it's also very taxing. Like, I worked in sex abuse in Columbus. I only lasted 2 years. I'm like, I can't do this. So how have you how have you helped your staff and or yourself deal with like secondary trauma, vicarious trauma? Because like you're saving people, but then like who's working with your staff? Like who's working with you? Like how are you guys taking care of each other while doing this type of work, this taxing but very, very necessary work?
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm learning how to take care of myself. Mm-hmm. I struggle with it.
Yeah.
Because I tend to put others before myself. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to learn how to take care of myself. And I'm not quite sure how to do that. Mm-hmm. Because as soon as that phone rings, I'm on top of it. I'm like, where do I need to be? Where do I go? Where do I send the money for the gas and fuel to get the girl out of the situation? I'm in constant, what do you call it? Autopilot? I'm in constant make it happen mode.
Flight mode. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Staff, the head rescuer in our program, I tell her all the time, relax, take for yourself. Mm-hmm. She can't. We have a program called Girls on the Run. In this program, when the girls are raped, when the girls are mutilated, they go to the police station, they file a report. There's a writ that has to be performed, and We have to change sometimes their identities. We hide them in the middle of the bushes in Kenya. We have to take them to court. They have to sit in front of their perpetrators and tell the judge what happened to them. Then we have to take them back to our houses and hide them again, change their identities, shave their heads.
Wow.
And the head rescuer says, I have to do this. I cannot rest, because if someone had helped me when I was raped and defiled, I would be a different person. So I have to give back. It's like this, there's this, what do you call it? There's this sense of
urgency.
Yeah, and a satisfaction that comes from, we got another one. We got, I don't know how Harriet Tubman felt, but every time she rescued another one, there was this energy. There was this sense of empowerment.
Wow. Shay, tell us, how can we support you before we go? We just have a few seconds. How can we support your mission?
I would love for you all to get the word out. Send people to our website, icanflyinternational.org. Learn how to support a child, sponsor a girl to go to school and get medical care and get counseling. All those things will help us continue to do what we do, so that we can take back these villages and these communities. Definitely our website, and it'll tell you how you can help.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for being on the couch with us.
We love that you are a part of our community, and we want you to continue to be a part of our community. So go ahead and do what? Like the videos, hit notification, and subscribe. We appreciate you guys.